And we're live, right. And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up for What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. For the second consecutive week, the Texans had an admirable loss, but a loss nonetheless in a season that continues to tailspin. But somebody coming to join me for a second time, Mr. Harley Dugan from the lead. Harley, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Just coming out of work, a little tired, but hey, I'm always down to talk Texans, no matter how worse the record can get.
Well, listen, I don't know how much worse it can. Well, I mean, yeah, they might not win another game for the rest of the season, but how have you kind of coped generally like this year? I think for me, I've kind of become, I think, apathetic overall. I think and I never kind of ever really envisaged I would ever be that disinterested on a Sunday when you've got failed trick plays, a stagnant offense.
Mhm.
Lovey not going for it on 4th and 1 at the 50-yard line. You think they've done so many things this year that kind of just makes you question, well, what's the point?
Yeah, no, there isn't. Before it used to be fun for me every Sunday. Wake up, get going, wash a few dishes, get the barbecue pit rolling, defrost whatever I need to defrost the day before. All of that's gone. Like when I watch the Texans now, it's, what are they going to do offensively that continues to surprise me? And the more intricate trick plays, the two QB system that just didn't work at all this week at all. It's getting old. I mean, you're 1-12-1. It's quite boring to watch them at times. The whole Kyle Allen thing was crazy to me. Davis Mills, I don't like his play this week. Sure, like you said, in terms of my change at the course, I just don't get up for it anymore. I will still watch because I'm a fan. I love being a fan, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I found myself kind of dipping in and out of games and flicking on the red zone at times. And I've never done that before. You always kind of wanted to watch every down, want to know kind of every line, but it's not easy. Didn't record a show last week, but of travel chaos you find in the UK, if you get the slightest bit of even mild weather, travel becomes very difficult. So it took a lot longer to get back from Dallas than we thought, but that was a great trip, and and there was a reasonable amount of Texans fans there. Nothing like what it was 8 years ago, and that was probably a moment that kind of got me. Well, I thought hooked. I'm maybe weaning myself off it slowly this year, going cold turkey a little. But I think it's a difficult one. I think, and how do you? What positive do you think you can take from this season, Harley?
Whoa. um, okay, so I will say Damian Pierce obviously is one right off the bat. Uh, you know, I guess that you can say, hey, you got yourself a running back finally since how long? I mean, Carlos Hyde did give you 1,000 yard rush season, so he seems like the forgotten running back. But and obviously the last one to Arian Foster. Damian Pierce has been a positive this year. Uh, Besides that, when you look at the rest of the draft class, and that's really all you did to improve this year was just add a draft class. And Derek Stingley, their ability questions can kind of continue. I hate to say that. I believe he has a lot of potential, and I'm very excited to see what he can be, and I'm sure he can be a really good cornerback in this league. But he played 9 games, and the durability questions were something that happened in LSU. They're starting to continue rookie year. I hate bringing it up. It's a sore spot for Texan fans because there's a lot of Derek Stingley. This is our pick. This is the third pick overall that we got. This is our
Yeah.
guy. I'm right there with it. But besides Pierce,
Just on the Stingley point, right? And it won't matter if he comes back and he plays 18 games next year because people will forget it because it's a lost season.
yeah,
Um, but it was a risk to take him at that point, and I don't think they have. They don't have the room for error for that pick not to work out. What you had to get kind of. And look, I know it's overblown. They've been used in very different ways, but he will always be compared to Sauce Gardner in New York, and it, it had to work out in a way early to show a direction of Nick Casario in this franchise. It hasn't to a degree. So that's going to linger, and that's going to linger right throughout the off season. And so will many storylines, just like we've had last year with trading a quarterback and all this kind of stuff. And I think that plus Kenyon Green struggles. Jalen Petrie's played really well the last couple of weeks, but he's struggled. And like, it was always going to happen. Rookies are going to have ups and downs, but I think the Stingley one is one to watch, because if he's doesn't play for 4 weeks, then gets placed on IR for the last 4 games, I don't know how the understanding of what that hamstring injury, I'm unclear how that changes so radically in 4 weeks when it was described as mild by Lovey. So yeah, I think you probably can't underestimate how important that pick was, and it has to pan out. Every single one of these 6 first-round picks over a 3-year period have to pan out in a big way, in varying degrees, but they have to be big players for you. So yeah, I think Stingley's a concern. And yeah, I mean, I suppose when I look around the rest of this roster, beyond sort of Malik Collins, we'll find out if Titus comes back. You got, and it's questionable how long Tunsil will be. But beyond that, there's, Jonathan Grenard's contract year. There's maybe a small handful of guys that you can rely on, or could potentially be starters elsewhere. And it's all about development in this draft class. So apart, and I think, of this class, if you take away the top 3 guys, is there anybody that's kind of caught your eye? Christian Harris, I suppose, had a good game. Teagan had a good game again as well. So they've kind of been nice little additions, I think, towards the back end of the year, despite the consistent defeats.
Yeah, Christian Harris definitely was like a quiet person that was just popping off the television screen for me. I was like, man, Christian Harris again? Oh, wow, Christian Harris again? And then I'm like, man, I wonder, I was curious, and I look at the stat sheet and I'm like, I believe he had 12 tackles, I believe, or 3 TFLs, and if I'm not mistaken. So, hey, overall, good game against a solid team in the Kansas City Chiefs. TQ Cotoriano, I keep an eye on him. I mean, I'm not going to be like, oh, this is, you have your diehards. So this is the next tight end for the Texans. We're not going to go there. But
you can block some. Give him that.
Yes, really good blocker, big body. The biggest question for him coming into the league in the draft was his hands. So far, it really hasn't been that much of a problem. So he was primarily a blocking tight end at, I believe it was Oregon State, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And, you've kind of used him a little bit in this pass game, and he's looked pretty all right so far,
I think, beyond that one, he bounced off the turf in the first pass play of the game against the Browns, which seems, again, only a couple of weeks ago, seems like a lifetime ago. But yeah, I think he's caught a couple of good touchdowns. That was a great route against the linebacker. He kind of gave him the head nod inside, then outside, and then he cut back in. So yeah, no, I think it was, I think there was definitely some positives in the game. I think it was interesting, and it's strange why it takes you this long in the season to start bringing extra. I know they've done it at times, but nowhere near regular enough. Bringing extra pressure from the second level. There was the first couple of drives. I think it was the second drive that was a 3 and out for the Chiefs, and Kirksey blitz up the middle. Cashman blitz out, and actually he's he's the first player to sign another 1-year deal for next year after they traded. I think it was a 6th round pick from the Jets. Come over. He's kind of looked okay. He's kind of basically taken the place of Garrett Wallow, and he's kind of disappeared. So with every plus there's a negative. There's not much overall build there, but yeah, there was some nice pieces. Is there anybody that surprised you in these last weeks? There's been a lot of injuries. 7 or 8 players that guaranteed starters aren't playing. But is there any guy that caught your eye under the radar?
Well, in terms of the season, I will say Steven Nelson caught my eye a lot. Didn't expect him to have this type of year. I was like, oh, okay, he looked like I don't know. He just screamed like a Texan signing. Like, he just screamed it. It screamed Terrence Mitchell from 2 years ago. So, but Steven Nelson has performed very well than Terrence Mitchell, and I'm actually would not mind, keeping him again. If he's going to continue doing this, then hey,
Yeah,
I mean, what else do you really got secondary wise? Yes, you want to improve. I get it. But I mean, I mean, it's not too bad. Desmond King's played well as well. I haven't seen too much Tyree Thomas. Seen a lot of Tremont Smith this last few weeks.
yeah, he's been
He's
good
been
too. Yeah,
he's been good, man. He's been solid.
yeah. I think.
Troy Harrison's another one. I
Yeah,
love Troy
yeah,
Harrison.
yeah. No, there was a great rundown on special teams, and made
Yeah.
a hell of a thump down the other end. But yeah, yeah, and I think you're right. Nelson and all that kind of guy, those guys in the back end, Kings kind of continue to be decent. I think it's something to build upon. And I think yeah, you've invested in that area. Obviously, if you get the chance to bring in a corner at any spot, whether it be free agency or draft, you
Yeah.
got to do it because you can never have enough. But what would you say, Harley? I mean, obviously the quarterback question. We'll come on to that separately, but excluding that, what would you say is the biggest need for this team in terms of addressing position wise this offseason for Nick Casario?
It has to go to the trenches, specifically the defensive line. The run, the defensive run
Yeah,
is just it's horrific. It's atrocious. I mean, the it's horrible. Okay, Malik Collins has been a bright spot these last 3 weeks now, and so he's looked really good. But I mean, Malik Collins really isn't known for his run defense. He's known for as a pass rushing interior defensive tackle. So I'd love to. I love, and it's desperate that you improve inside the defensive line. I did not know, I did not realize that we were going to enter this year with Roy Lopez and Kurt Heinisch as
yeah,
my defensive linemen. I did not realize that. All I hear from local media and the timeline on Twitter is, "Oh man, the defensive line is it's deep, man. It's there's a lot of depth on the defensive line." And I'm like thinking about it now, and man, who else was there besides Roy Lopez, Kurt Heinrich? You traded away Ross Blacklock. I'm not look, Blacklock wasn't anything that I'm going crazy about, but when you have a lack of depth in the
yeah.
interior, like I think he would have been at least somewhat helpful than a Michael Dwumfor who you brung in after you cut Jaleel Johnson, who actually looked
All right,
okay,
yeah,
and now Michael Dwumfor is with the Niners. I mean, the rotating cast at interior D line is something that I really question about Nick Casario. Is what are we doing with the defensive line? Like, what are we doing?
yeah. Yeah, I think that yeah, it did kind of seem like a decent unit on paper. I think there was plenty of competition there in terms of numbers, but yeah, the quality I think has been lacking. Yeah, some strange releases on both sides of the ball this year. Absolutely, and I think that's a fundamental part of your football team. You got to be able to be serviceable against the run. Otherwise, every game that's I think for me it's a toss up between linebacker and
Yeah,
obviously you want as many guys, assuming we're playing a 4-3, which is definitely up for debate. We'll come on to that before we wrap up. But I think, you saw yesterday with the Chiefs, they just, the two touchdowns McKinnon had predominantly, linebacker issues, catching passes at the backfield. They are elite at the screen game. You got to have good linebackers to get across. And I think, you've got the makings of somebody in Christian Harris, but I think, he's, just like on the other side of the ball, Nico Collins is probably a good third option, possibly developing a good second. You need some stars there, and I wouldn't put wide receiver too far past. Particularly if Coops goes, it probably quickly vaults to your number one sort of talent need outside quarterback. So there's a lot of there's a lot of holes to fill, and a lot of pieces need to be found this off season. And again, just like this off season, I think Harley, I keep thinking to myself, well, it can't be done all in one year. And again, I think it's going to require more patience. You're going to have to ask more of fans, and that certainly was clear on the broadcast yesterday when you saw them at red jerseys and they weren't battle red. That was for sure. So yeah, I think there's a lot to go after, or there's a lot that needs to be tackled in the off season. But how do you think they do it? I mean, what's a kind of quick route to being semi-competitive at least this year, rather than accepting defeat perhaps before even before the opening kickoff, which kind of feels like this year and to a degree last.
yeah. Oh man, that's such a tough question. I mean, Ideally, you would love to bring in a mix again. I really love to see some more young talent. You're going to have plentiful of picks this year with the Deshaun Watson trade. So that's going to be helpful. You know, you're going to have extra picks. Whether or not you trade down with them and gain extra, that's besides the point. But what we're looking at right now on papers, you have the picks in order to improve this team, to inject some youth into this team. We talked about the secondary, which has been a strength, but the biggest weakness of it is it needs youth. It needs an injection of youth, just like linebacker. Talent, youth. You need to inject it with it. What do you do for that? Maybe you go out, you got to spend a little money in free agency, but I really wouldn't say to go crazy because you also got to know that overall the plan for this was a rebuild and you have to be patient. And it's tough, really is. It's tough to be in a rebuild as a fan. Believe me, I went through it with the Astros and I went through it with the Rockets, and it's tough to be this way, especially from Houston side point perspective, but Nick Casario, I mean, the way what he came into for the Texans is unfathomable. You didn't have your quarterback wants to get out of here. You're in cap hell. Like you're trying to reparate everything that Bill O'Brien just destroyed, along with Easterby. And I'm glad he's gone. The overall consensus for me is to inject this team with some youth, grab some undrafted free agents, take a look into that. That's something you didn't do 2 years ago, which still questions me more. And then, you have to pick and choose veterans that can come in here, relatively good, cheap signings. Someone like Steven Nelson, who is not relatively old, but not that young either, good veteran. That was a great signing for you. If you can do that along the interior defensive line, maybe offensive line, or whether you want to go to draft or veteran help. Obviously, offensive line doesn't seem like a strong position in terms of free agency, but you got to do something in order to create some level of wanting to watch the Texans. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's really
I think
bad.
I think it's the lack of progress for me, or the lack of direction. You don't mind it being slow, as long as you can see it building towards something. I think that's what people have struggled with this year. The talent, it'll be what it'll be. If, as you said, if Casario bats 500 and he gets three of the six, then you're probably about where good looks like. So and if that is the case, it's not going to be good enough to make this team better. And there'll be a lot of talent questions. Is there any, just before we move on, is there any guys that you would definitely take in the college game that you think warrant? We're definitely. I don't think there's any doubt we're going to get this first overall picks. I suppose. Are you sold on Bryce Young if we take that first?
I've waffled, and I've been on the Bryce Young thing, and then I'm like, man, but Jalen Carter, he looks something like I would really love Jalen Carter in a Texan uniform. You
Mm.
know, I, and even before this year, way months ago, it was all Will Anderson. But now it's turned to Jalen Carter. My perspective has turned to Bryce Young, though, at the end of the day, and it just don't have a quarterback. Quarterback's the most important position on the team. You want to create direction immediately. You
Yeah.
grab someone like a Bryce Young, and with the plentiful of picks you have, with what you should have a lot more money going into next year, helps out Bryce Young. And what I look at a lot is look at the last 2 weeks. You contended with the Dallas Cowboys, the Kansas City Chiefs, with Davis Mills in a gimmicky offense. Does Bryce Young, with everything else that's staying pat, does Bryce Young maybe even get you a win in one of those games? Like, is that crazy to say? Because
Yeah.
look at what Davis Mills and Jeff Driscoll, goodness, look at what they did the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And does Bryce Young warrant another win? Does he win that game in Denver way in the beginning of the season? Instead of that tie with the Colts, does Bryce Young give you that win? Look, I'm unsure. It's a rookie quarterback. You understand that there's going to be inconsistencies with him. But that goes down to coaching staff as well. and that's oof,
Yeah,
that's a big thing with Bryce Young. So if you can bring in a right coaching staff with him, then you're going to be
yeah.
cooking with gas.
Yeah, and I think there was, yeah, it extends the timelines. I think it buys Caserio some breathing room because it gives your team an identity. And I put lots of clips. I was deep in the draft last year, put out lots of clips, and instantly, Stevie Wonder could tell you that Jalen Carter is going to be an elite player. It might not pan out. Nobody knows because, but the limited amount of snaps he plays in that defense at Georgia, the heavy rotation because you got to keep guys happy in the college game now. Otherwise, they'll walk and go in the transfer portal because it's so fluid. But despite his limited snaps, he stands out a hell of a lot. Now, ideally, you would have had this Browns pick, then you could have got him plus somebody else, or Will Anderson plus somebody else. But it looks like they're going to be a pick in the high teens now with the way it's going. It's 6 and 8. Obviously, they beat Baltimore this weekend, so we can no longer guarantee that pick. But I think what it does is it extends Caserio's timelines if he takes a quarterback. But I think we'll know if he's going to take a quarterback or not probably well before the draft. But I did notice Lance Erline tweeting out saying I just find it hard that an NFL GM will be able to commit the first overall pick to a quarterback that's under £200. Now he is a hell of a player. I think he's got an it factor. He's got a rare skill that ascends other people's talents, and I think that's what you're looking for when you take a guy at that position that high. He has to elevate others around him rather than need in Davis Mills' case, which we've seen and it was kind of clear and obvious. But here we are now talking about it. That he needs talent around him. That's not a knock on him. That's just the matter of the fact. So I think he potentially doesn't tick the boxes of a traditional scout type, like Nick Caserio will take, and I think that's the concern. Now, I suppose when I take that view, and if you think of all the messing around of the last two coaching hires and how he deliberated, he's an overthinker. I think he's going to overthink it, but I think if he does, and Bryce Young becomes a day one standout, he's gone. If you take him, then it extends the timelines. It gives you a bit of direction, ideally with a new coaching staff. That is enough, or at least have some, or a new offensive coaching staff at the very least. Then it gives you some direction. So I don't think he's got a choice not to do it. I don't think he wants to do it, and I think we all do. We all make decisions all the time that we don't necessarily want to do. But you've got to see the bigger picture. So I think he's backed himself in a corner with a lack of progress, like some of the things you touched upon there, Harley. And I think he's got no choice. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. And I hate saying that because I don't like being backed into a corner. I really don't. I'd love to have that flexibility to grab a Jalen Carter who just looks special. I can't stop watching his film. It's just amazing what he is and the freak he can be in this league. But I think it is Bryce Young or bust for Nick Caserio in terms of his job security. If you grab the Jalen Carter, like you implied, the possibility of another down season, how much patience does Cal McNair, how much rope is he giving Nick Caserio? And that's what you would find out quickly if he grabbed Jalen Carter and passed on Bryce Young. You'd find out how much rope does Cal McNair give Nick Caserio. You will find out quickly.
Yeah, because a defensive tackle, no matter how good he is, can only win you games in certain situations, providing your team, can keep in games, and we're not in that spot yet. And obviously, to be honest, I'm not 100% sold on his run defense. I think there's still an improvement Jalen Carr can make, but I think he's definitely a top 3 or 4 prospect. But again, it's a traditional scout. Would they value the defensive tackle over an edge rusher, over a cornerback again? And I think that'll count against them because defensive tackles rarely go that high, and the ones that do become stars are the ones that like Chris Jones, Aaron Donald to a lesser degree. These are the guys that develop and become stars rather than being a polished star. So I think there's a little buyer's beware. I think with Carter as well. I think you got to, just because it's so rare that it's a day one plug in. Top 3 pick. I can't think of one. You may be able to correct me, but so I think that's the big issue. And I think, but we'll know and we'll come on to the draft, and looking forward to that part of the process and for this off season because it was certainly good last year. Hopefully we can, it will be as equally as intriguing again because I think it's looking like a good class. But I touched on it there, Harley. Do you think that we'll know well before the draft if they're taking a quarterback because of if they make a change at the coaching staff, and if so, what do you think they'll do, or what would be your choice to change it up? Because I think the coaching on this season has not been good enough, and I think you didn't think and done would be possible, but it's been that bad. I think it might have to be.
Yeah, no, I believe. Well, first, I do believe that if they're going to go quarterback in the draft, that you're going to find out fast. Most of the time, you always know who the first overall pick is going to be. Just always seems like national media and the talking heads, they find out fast. And whether it was last year with Trayvon Walker going to the Jaguars, it kind of felt like that was the overall consensus first round pick, especially it being a quarterback. Someone's going to get that out real quick. And I know Casario's tight-lipped. I get it, but this is a quarterback. Joe Burrow, Bengals, boom, done.
Yeah.
And I know that was a knockdown, guy that was going to go there. But I think if it's a quarterback, you're going to find out fast. Now, in regards to the coaching staff, look, I never liked the Lovie Smith hire, and I was always one to say that on my channel. I just did not like it. I thought it was another bridge coach hiring. If you were going to hire Lovie Smith, you should have hired him last year instead of David Culley, and run it with him for 2 years. Here you go. You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye. But I just never liked the hire. His antiquated Jurassic defense, that Tampa 2 defense that he loves to run, I really thought he had me fooled for a little while. I thought that drafting Derek Stingley was a precursor to Lovie Smith opening up the idea from changing zone to man, utilizing man a lot more in his defensive scheme. That's what I thought it could be. And when I was at the Texans draft party, and I talked to Seth Payne and I asked him that question, like, hey, what do you think about the Derek Stingley pick? Do you believe that maybe we're going to utilize more man-to-man? And exactly what Seth Payne, like I just regurgitated, Seth Payne says, yeah, I think that Lovie Smith is going to potentially play more man-to-man, and it's possibly a good sign that Derek Stingley's a pick. Hindsight now, fast forward, we're still stuck in this zone defense that I'm just not a fan of. I like a 4-3 defense. I have no problem with it. But this Tampa 2 defense, it's old. It's not. He doesn't adapt. So someone like Matt Eberflus for a second is someone that came from a 4-3 Tampa 2 scheme, Rod Marinelli, and the Dallas Cowboys. But what's so good about Matt Eberflus is he adapts to today's NFL and utilizes a lot of cover 3 into his defensive scheme. That's something you won't see out of Lovie Smith. You just won't see it. Old school. I need a new coaching staff. I don't want Lovie Smith here no more.
Yeah.
Who could it be? I mean, we saw the Jeremy Fowler reports with Jonathan Gannon again. Seems like the rumblings are there again.
Do you know, like that's weird when he kind of got so far in the process. Everybody, the Senior Bowl that he spoke to, of all the media that gets assembled, all thought it was going to be him. I find it hard to believe that unless he said, look, I'll do it next year, and this has been agreed all along. I find it hard if he was truly rejected, and he thought he was getting it and didn't. I find it hard that you come back crawling to this situation a year on. Now it may be predetermined. He may have a coach. He may have needed another year to get his coaching staff done. I saw today the Eagles are potentially going to be the first team ever to have 4 guys to get double-digit sacks. So there's an element of and we saw that on the Thursday night game. There's an element of talent there that he's working with this year that the GM gave him, and Bradbury and Gardner Johnson and all these kind of guys. So the talent level's pretty, it's up there in sort of top 5 or 6 units, I think, in the league. So, last year he was heavily criticised as the defensive coordinator. So if it's him, great. As long as he's the best man for the job, brilliant. I always think it's so hard to tell because people just instantly gravitate. It's fashionable to say, let's get the best coordinator. Which guy's unit's done the best? But actually, that's not what you need. And Vrabel was a god awful defensive coordinator, but he's one hell of a football coach, and that was obvious by watching him work and speak to the media. And when you saw him on Hard Knocks, there's it is the leader you need, not the guy who's the most technical. So I think there's a lot to be decided. But I struggle to see a situation where there isn't a new head coach, unless Lovey stays by the skin of his teeth and just clears the offensive staff. But bringing in a new system for a young guy with a temporary head coach is difficult. And I think if you were that offensive coordinator, if you're a quarterbacks coach somewhere around the league, do you want to come work for Lovie Smith if he's basically being given another year of execution? No, you're not going to risk your career on that. So I think you have to clear the whole deck if you're going to bring in a quarterback, whether that's Bryce Young, whether that's CJ Stroud. Time will tell. I think. I think one thing I learned last year, there was loads of guys that I just didn't think were great. Tariq Woolen, for example, I just didn't see it. I thought, yeah, you can see the measurables. Isaiah Likely was a guy as well. Yeah, okay, I see it, but I don't see him doing anything. But then they translate and they look like they're good year one pros, if not excellent. So, I think there's certain guys that you watch that is obvious and it doesn't happen. So, it is a complete lottery. We all know that. That's why the process is so great, the draft. But I think that the big thing we have to think about is the coaching staff. But it's the first domino, I think, in this off season. I think when that falls, and that might be in 3 weeks time, less than that. But one thing, Harley, I think after the last two off seasons, with all the McCowan crap that went on, if Nick moves, I hope he moves quick and we don't look like we're holding the can again, because that's happened 2 years in a row. If that happens 3 years in a row, I think it would almost be as inexcusable to say I don't think you could let him see through the draft with his staff, and then potentially it's up for debate at that point if you're holding the can again, because you can't deliberate, overthink. If you've had all off season, you always knew this was going to be temporary. So if it is Gannon, great, but do not fuck about and wait for this to happen, because if you do, then we're in a position where you're not progressing the reputation of this organisation, and you're certainly not progressing the faith that you're asking a fan base to put in you again, which is going to be naively anyway. But that has to happen for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I really do. And even you waited so long the last 2 years. You were the last team to hire a head coach, and what even is worse to me is you had potentially better candidates still out there, and you still decide to David Coley and Lovie Smith your way into 4 wins the last 2 years now. I mean, it's horrible, man. This is it's just rough, man. It gets really bad, because I mean, I start talking about the coaching staff, and it's something I spend so much time in the off season. I spend so much time breaking down all these coaching staffs, the potential OCs, the QB's coach, D-line coach, linebackers coach. I look through if they were former players, and who did they play with, and I look through the rosters each several years, and I look who's a coach now. Oh, that's a connection. For example, like Chris Harris, he is a defensive backs coach for the Washington football team. He was a former player for Lovie Smith, and he was a safety, really good safety for the Bears, all pro, and had some really good years for them. Now he's a defensive backs coach for the Washington football team. Who's the head coach? Ron Rivera. Oh, that connection. Ron Rivera was the linebackers coach for Lovie Smith with the Chicago Bears. That's right. Chris Harris is with the Washington football team. That's someone I would have loved the Houston Texans to grab and improve this defensive secondary. Regardless, the secondary has looked good, but there isn't one coach on this coaching staff that you can pull and someone's going, yeah, I want him on my staff. I can't. Who?
Yeah. Well, I thought last year the best coach on this team was Bobby King, and he went to Tennessee, yes, which a number of other guys have done. And I'm only going on the improvement of the requisite talent level or the expected talent level to the production. I think, and you certainly not Miles Smith. You can maybe make an argument for the offensive line has been better at times, but it took a hell of a dip, and then the last 3 games it's come back. So it's been too variable. There's been too much peaks and troughs, but you need consistency at this level for your team to be able to be productive on a Sunday. So I think it all seems like it's going to point to reformation once more for the 3rd season and off season in a row. to be a new coaching staff. Who they get is anybody's guess. I hope that that it was basically agents. My client would love to work with you, Nick, but unfortunately, this is not the right time. You're in a hell of a mess. So once you get out of that mess a little bit, then we'll look at it. But I think if you've got the first overall pick, you can sell the hell out of that to an agent and to get their coach to come. So I hope that's the case, and that's the difference between this time and last year. And this time and last year, there is potential quarterbacks to do. Where do you sit on the kind of build and hope you're in a spot? I mean, because let's be honest, the talent level on this roster, even if you do a sterling job, you're probably going to be in the contention for the top 5 to 10 picks the year after. Again, it's just the reality of it, of where this team is just now. Would you take the? I don't think Casado's in a position to do, but if all things were equal, would you take the risk of And everybody says next year's quarterback class is much better. No guarantees on that whatsoever. But would you take that risk that you just say your 2-year talent pipeline looks a lot rosier based on all the evaluations you've done to this point? Would you take that risk? Because I just think, for me, it's just too much to do. But and I think the worst thing is, or the biggest point is, you could take 2 years back to back if you really wanted, if you found yourself in that position. But would you take that risk, and do you think they could potentially take that risk? Because it seems one hell of a gamble if they were to.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't even gotten into it with the channel on my channel yet. It's something that I've let marinate, and I'm just staring at it. And I know I gotta open that chicken that's marinating, and it's the Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, conversation. And look, when I look at Caleb Williams, oh man, he pops off the television screen. There's something different with Caleb Williams when I'm watching him. I don't know, man. Just the arm velocity, the way he moves around the pocket. And look, I know people immediately are throwing the Patrick Mahomes comparisons. That's always going to happen. They're in basketball. Oh, well, that's the next Michael Jordan, Tracy McGrady, next Michael Jordan, Grant Hill, next Michael Jordan. So that's always going to happen, okay?
Yeah.
Williams is a very, very good, going to be a really good quarterback next year for whoever team gets him. For at least I think so, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But if you can't guarantee me the number 1 pick overall next year, then I'm sorry. I can't do it. I love him. I really do.
Yeah.
But I can't do that gamble unless you're guaranteeing me the number 1 pick overall. Hey, it is what it is. With Caleb Williams, I understand he looks like he could be, and I don't throw that word around a lot, but generational quarterback. He looks like he's reaching that sort of trademark on him. But again, the gamble is too big for me. It's just, I love him though. I really do.
Yeah, it's a transcendent talent, I think, isn't it? It's just, and I suppose when you watch USC, which I've not watched a huge amount of, but when you watch their defense, it isn't very good. So, they're big, high-scoring games, so he's putting up as many points as he has to, and he keeps doing it consistently. And I think, he is, but I suppose, as you said, if he continues that, he could break his leg tomorrow, and I wish him all the success. But I think, but anything could happen in a year. You could just disappear. It's all a year out, and guys, Joe Burrow wasn't in the running, and he's going into his 3rd year, and it looks like he's going to be a consistently top, good top 5 level quarterback. Yeah, well, exactly. Well, him, I think if you ever saw him on that Netflix series, you knew he didn't have the mental capability for it. But
there's little stuff with him, but
but yeah. So I don't know. I just hope whatever happens, it works out. When you drafted Watson, you didn't necessarily think he was going to be as good as he was, and okay, it doesn't look great right now. But I think he was a hell of a player for us for a couple of years, and that's the kind of level of talent that we have to find to get it now. Is it going to be perfect if we get a quarterback and you hit and there's lots of holes? No, but it's better than what it is now. It gives you something to watch. It gives you something to believe in. It gives you a reason to buy jerseys, buy tickets. And it makes the club something viable again. And I think that's the big issue. Like you said, the patience will be tested. There's only so long a business can fail, albeit numerically it will continue to deliver just because of the structure of the league. But to be thriving and be successful, not have empty seats and not to be full of travelling fans, then you need it to be watchable. And I think a quarterback may give us that. But any final words before we head out here? Any more reflections, Harley? Before we're probably only going to do one more episode before the end of the year, with Christmas and New Year and all that. I don't think anybody's going to take too much of their festive cheer to listen to the stuff, because it's been repetitive and I'm very conscious of that, and I'm kind of bored of talking about the same shit, to be honest. But there you go.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know. I've focused more on Astros on my channel, but hey, the Texans, look, they're 1-12-1. The patience will be, it's going to be stretched. And like you said, the first domino is the coaching staff. Can they get the coaching staff correct? And you don't necessarily have to rush into a decision, but please don't be the last damn hire. Please don't do that. Take a look at Gannon. Looks like whatever it is coming out to Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano. Whether or not that's true, but hey, you did take a look at him last year. D'Amico Ryans is another name. You have to interview these guys. I'm going to be upset like Robert Saleh 2 years ago, who I kept banging on the table for. Robert Saleh didn't get an interview. And that's what really upsets me.
Yeah.
Okay, you picked David Coley. I always thought it was just a whatever kind of hire. But what really upsets me more is you don't interview guys that need the interview. You interview a Hines Ward. What is this? You're doing him a favor? Good for him. Awesome. You're a wide receivers coach now, Hines Ward. Congratulations. It's not like you couldn't get that position regardless. So I need to see interviews. I need to see a D'Amico Ryans interview. Hell, I need to see a Ben Johnson interview for the Detroit Lions. Brian Johnson, the OC for the Eagles. He deserves an interview. I want to see guys that Ejiro Evero, defensive coordinator for the Broncos.
Yeah.
I'd like
quite
to
impressive,
see,
quite impressive.
Yes, I'd love to. He's from the Dom Capers tree. He literally learned everything from Dom Capers in Green Bay. That's why he went to Denver, to Nathaniel Hackett, Green Bay, even though Evero was with the St. Louis Rams, Los Angeles Rams. Still get that mixed up. But, that's what I'm trying to see is I want to see who's he interviewing, and I need to see good interviews.
Yeah.
And then I need to see, okay, this is your list. All right, now we get to pick and choose. Let's not rush, but let's not be slow about it. Get the coaching staff right. Grab Bryce Young. I think that's the pick, regardless of what we believe. How much I love Jalen Carter. I love Jalen Carter. But regardless, I do think it's going to be Bryce Young. Like you said, I think he's pigeonholed in a corner. You grab the right coaching staff. You get Bryce Young. Let's move forward with this franchise, and let's finally have a direction that the fans, we can see where we're going a little bit now.
Yeah.
That's the final thought.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think, if you can build momentum with the coaching staff and builds his own staff that creates confidence, that creates respect, that, the agents aren't trying to keep their client's name away from it, because I do generally think that's been the case. People just didn't want to touch it. Then if you can give a level of respectability and confidence with the coaching staff, then, take a quarterback, and then it's in the lap of the gods at that point. But nice to be back this week talking about the Texans, travel and all that. Slight disdain for this team. Thanks to Harley for his time. This was a very late put together, no agenda. We just spitballed it, and here we are. It's 40 minutes then. Kind of repetitive, I get it, but maybe it gives you a bit of sense of what's to come this off season. There's not much point talking about the games. The roof got stuck on Sunday. Which I saw, and hopefully that can get fixed just in the same way that this team can. But thank you again for listening to the Turn Up for What podcast, and we'll be back once more before we wrap up for this off season, and then we'll kick it into the draft, new coaching staff, all that kind of good stuff. We'll be news led, not content led, because I think we got to take it one stage at a time. It's a long old